Captain James Mitchell's hands trembled as he stared at the holographic display floating above the command console. The coffee cup beside him had gone cold hours ago, forgotten in the face of what he was witnessing. After 50 years of enforced peace, humanity had forgotten what fear truly felt like. But the massive alien fleet materializing at the edge of their solar system was a brutal reminder that some lessons, once learned, are never truly forgotten. "Sir, we're detecting over 1,000 vessels," reported Lieutenant Emma Carter, her voice barely above a whisper. She adjusted her glasses nervously, the same glasses she'd worn while studying peaceful xenobiology just last week. They're bigger than anything we've ever seen." James squinted at the display. Each ship was the size of Manhattan, bristling with weapons that looked like they could crack planets. And there were thousands of them, arranged in perfect formation like a predator's teeth. The irony wasn't lost on humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. They were about as prepared as a kindergarten class facing a pack of wolves. The bridge of the Earth Defense Station fell silent. You know that moment in horror movies, when the music stops and everyone holds their breath? This was exactly like that, except nobody was going to yell cut and reset the scene. James had lived his entire life knowing that humanity was protected by the Guardians, ancient beings who had arrived decades ago and stripped away mankind's weapons, their armies, their very capacity for violence. In exchange, they promised eternal peace and protection. It had seemed like a good deal at the time. No more wars, no more suffering, no more children growing up in fear. The Guardians had been true to their word for half a century. It turned Earth into a paradise, where the biggest conflict was usually which movie to watch on Friday night. Now the Guardians were gone. Their crystalline ships lay shattered in the void beyond Pluto, and Earth stood naked before a new threat. The debris field stretched for millions of miles, beautiful, deadly, and absolutely terrifying in what it represented. Their protectors hadn't just left, they'd been destroyed. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Lucas Thompson, his young face pale with terror. His hands shook as he worked the controls, probably wondering if this was some kind of elaborate training exercise. It wasn't. The voice that filled the bridge was like grinding metal, speaking imperfect English through their translation systems. Every word dripped with malice and hunger. "Humans of Earth, I am Warlord Vex of the Ravager fleet. Your protectors have been consumed. You have 24 hours to prepare for harvest. We will strip your worlds bare and add your biomass too. Our collective resistance will only prolong your suffering." The transmission included visual data images of other worlds the Ravagers had harvested. James watched in horror as he saw entire cities being dismantled at the molecular level, their populations absorbed into massive biomechanical constructs. This wasn't conquest. This was consumption. These creatures didn't want to rule humanity. They wanted to eat them. The transmission ended, leaving behind a silence that felt like death itself. The bridge crew stared at each other with the kind of shell-shocked expressions you see after natural disasters. Except this disaster was unnatural, alien, and heading straight for them at a significant percentage of light speed. James looked around at his crew scientists, engineers, explorers, who had never known war. Emma Carter had spent her career studying peaceful alien artifacts. Lucas Thompson's biggest challenge before today had been decoding cosmic background radiation. Chief Engineer Daniel Parker knew more about fusion reactors than anyone alive. But he'd never designed a weapon in his life. They had no weapons, no military training, no concept of battle. The Guardians had made sure of that. But here's the thing about humans that the Guardians never quite understood. You can suppress the warrior spirit, but you can't eliminate it. It's written into our DNA, carved into our souls by millions of years of evolution. We're the descendants of creatures who survived ice ages, plagues, and countless predators by refusing to give up. "Sir," Emma said, her voice gaining strength with each word, "what are your orders?" That question hung in the air like a challenge. What orders could he give? They had exploration vessels, not warships. They had mining equipment, not weapons. They had 50 years of peace, not centuries of military tradition. James felt something stirring in his chest, something that had been dormant for 50 years. It started as a flutter, then grew into a burn, then exploded into something he barely recognized. It was rage. Pure, burning rage at the creatures that dared to threaten his world, his people, his daughter sleeping peacefully in New York, his little Sarah, who'd never seen violence except in history books, who believed the universe was fundamentally safe because the Guardians had made it so. The rage spread through him like fire, and with it came clarity. The Guardians had protected humanity by making them helpless. But helplessness wasn't humanity's natural state. 50 years ago, his grandfather had fought in the last war before the Guardians arrived. The old man had died when James was young, but not before sharing stories of human courage under impossible odds. "Sir," Emma pressed, her eyes reflecting the same growing fire he felt in his chest. James straightened, feeling something click into place inside him. The fear was still there, but now it was joined by something else's determination. The kind of stubborn, bloody-minded determination that had carried humans from caves to the stars. "Get me Admiral Rebecca Stone on Luna Base," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even him. "Priority 1 emergency channel, and Emmy wants you to access the historical archives. Everything we have on pre-Guardian military, technology, and tactics." Lucas looked up from his console. "Sir, those files are restricted." The Guardians are dead," James cut him off. Their rules died with them, looking at each crew member in the eye. "Send a message to every human settlement in the solar system. All colonies, all research stations, all trading posts. Tell them it's time to remember what we are. But what exactly were they? That was the question that would define the next 24 hours and possibly the survival of the human species. Because somewhere in humanity's suppressed memory lay the key to fighting back against an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. The question was, could they remember how to be warriors before it was too late? And speaking of remembering powerful, forces that compound over time just like humanity's dormant warrior. Spirit building for 50 years, there's another incredible force you need to understand. Something that can transform your life just as dramatically as war transformed Earth. Stay tuned for our next video, where we explore the unstoppable power of compounding and how it can turn small actions into extraordinary results. The emergency session of the Terran Council convened in the deep chambers beneath Luna City, where the carved walls bore the names of every nation that had once existed on Earth. The irony was almost laughable. They were meeting in a monument to human conflict while trying to figure out how to fight again. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled representatives, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. Behind her, holographic displays showed the approaching alien armada in all its terrifying glory. "The Guardians are gone," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber that had once echoed with debates about trade agreements and research funding. Now it would decide humanity's survival. Our deep space sensors confirm it. The debris field beyond Pluto's orbit contains crystalline fragments consistent with their ship construction. They fought, and they lost. The silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear the collective gulp of 300 representatives trying to process the impossible. For 50 years, the Guardians had been the ultimate authority beings so advanced they might as well have been gods. The idea that something could destroy them was like learning that gravity had suddenly stopped working. Council leader William Jung, man whose family had once led the North American Federation before the Guardians abolished nations, leaned forward in his chair. His weathered face showed every one of his 78 years. How is that possible? The Guardians were ... like. Their technology was beyond our understanding. Elena activated the holographic display, showing the Ravager fleet in all its terrifying glory. Each ship pulsed with a sickly red energy that seemed to devour light itself, because they forgot something crucial about warfare. They became so focused on preventing conflict that they lost the ability to wage it effectively. The Ravagers, on the other hand, have clearly spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest. Representative Charlotte O'Brien, her Boston accent thick with despair, slumped in her seat. "Then we're doomed. We have no weapons, no soldiers, no training," Alina interrupted, stepping closer to the assembly. But we have something else. Something the Guardians never understood. She gestured to the walls around them, to the names carved in stone America. China, Russia, Nigeria, Brazil, the nations that had once sent their children to die for causes they believed in. We have the memory of war. The chamber erupted. In confused voices, some representatives looked incredulous, others terrified. A few of the older ones who remembered stories from their grandparents began to nod slowly. Alina raised her hand for silence, and surprisingly, got it. The Guardians made a fundamental error, she continued, her voice gaining strength. They assumed that by preventing us from fighting, they could remove our capacity for warfare. They were wrong. They could suppress the expression of violence. But they couldn't eliminate the knowledge, the instincts, sheer bloody-minded stubbornness that got us to the stars in the first place. Think about it. Have you ever tried to completely forget how to ride a bike? Even after years of not riding, the moment you get back on, your muscles remember. Your brain remembers. Some things are carved too deep to erase. Alina activated another display, this one, showing historical footage from Earth's archives. Images flashed across the screen, ancient battles where warriors fought with bronze and iron. Medieval sieges where defenders held impossible odds. World wars where entire nations mobilized for survival, and the final conflicts that had preceded the Guardians' arrival. The representatives watched in fascination and horror as humanity's violent history played out before them. Every human alive today carries the genetic memory of 10,000 years of warfare, Alina declared. Every tactical manual, every weapons schematic, every strategy and counter-strategy is still in our databases. The Guardians never deleted this information, they simply made it irrelevant. But relevance has a way of changing quickly. Marcus Chen, monitoring the communications array in the corner of the chamber, suddenly shot to his feet, like he'd been electrocuted. Director, I'm picking up something. It's coming from the Guardian ruins near Jupiter. Lena's heart skipped. A survivor? After seeing those massive debris fields, she'd assumed every Guardian was dead. The transmission that filled the chamber was weak, distorted, breaking up like a bad cell phone call from the worst possible moment. But it was unmistakably from a Guardian survivor. The voice was fading, desperate, carrying the weight of a dying civilization. Human... children? Forgive us. We... underestimated... The hunger of the void. The RAVAG. Ours... they are not. Us they do not... seek order. They consume... everything, even themselves. Eventually you must. You must remember what you were... before we... changed you. The signal died with a burst of static, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Alina felt like she'd just witnessed a deathbed confession from a god. The beings who had reshaped human civilization were admitting they'd made a mistake, and now it was up to humanity to fix it. Alina felt the weight of 50 years of peace pressing down on her shoulders like a mountain. The enforcement fields were still active across human space, still preventing humans from harming each other. Those invisible barriers had eliminated murder, assault, even schoolyard fights. But against an alien threat, the fields, she said suddenly, her mind racing, they're designed to prevent human and human violence. But they were never calibrated for alien contact because the Guardians never imagined we'd need to fight non-humans. Representative James Chin from the Mars colony spoke up from the back of the chamber. Are you suggesting we can actually fight these Ravagers? Elena's smile was grim, the kind of expression that probably looked familiar to generals throughout human history. I'm suggesting we're going to have to learn how, very quickly. She pulled up another display, this one showing the industrial capabilities of the solar system. Mining operations, manufacturing facilities, research stations, all the peaceful. Infrastructure of human expansion. We have 50 years of advanced technology, unlimited resources, and the entire historical military knowledge of humanity. We have 17 hours before the Ravagers reach Mars. We need to wake up the warrior that the Guardians put to sleep. And how exactly do we do that? Asked William Jong, though something in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Elena's smile widened, and for the first time in decades, It contained something the Guardians had tried to eliminate from human nature: the savage joy of a species that refused to go quietly into extinction. We start by breaking the first rule the Guardians gave us: build weapons. Big ones. The chamber exploded into activity as council members activated their personal communicators, sending urgent messages across the solar system. But would 17 hours be enough to remember how to be human? And what would they become in the process? As the representatives dispersed to begin the impossible task of preparing for war, Alina remained in the chamber, staring at the names on the walls. Somewhere in those carved letters were the spirits of every human who had ever fought for their survival, their freedom, their right to exist. The Guardians had tried to bury that spirit under 50 years of peace, but Alina could feel it stirring. Now, like a sleeping giant awakening to the sound of approaching danger, humanity was about to remember what it meant to be human. But first, they had to survive the night. Just like humanity's dormant warrior spirit, there's another powerful force that builds quietly over time until it becomes unstoppable. Want to discover how small, consistent actions can create extraordinary transformations in your life? Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding, where we reveal how this hidden force can change everything. The industrial rings of Ceres had never been designed for weapons manufacturing. For 50 years, they had produced peaceful technologies fusion reactors that powered entire worlds, terraforming equipment that turned barren rocks into gardens, and the delicate instruments of scientific exploration that had mapped every corner of the solar system. Now, in the span of 16 hours, they were being converted into something the solar system had never seen: a weapons factory. It was like turning a library into a battlefield possible, but it required throwing out everything you thought you knew about the rules. Dr. Alina Vasquez stood in the command center of the hastily established Defense Coordination Hub, watching as thousands of automated systems worked with desperate efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on Hertha. Guardians had left humanity with incredible manufacturing capabilities, but they had never imagined those capabilities would be turned toward warfare. It was like giving a child the world's most advanced kitchen, and being shocked when they tried to make something other than cookies. "Status report," she called out to the bustling control room, her voice cutting through the chaos of a dozen conversations happening simultaneously. "Particle beam arrays are at 60% completion," reported Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Kim, formerly of the Terran Space Patrol, a peaceful organization that had been hastily militarized in the past day. Uniforms still bore the old motto: to explore and protect. Now the protect part was about to get a whole new meaning. The main batteries should be operational within 4 hours. "Missile production is ahead of schedule," added Dr. Thomas Morrison, who had been the solar system's leading expert on controlled explosions for mining operations. The man who used to blow up asteroids for a living was now adapting his expertise for a much deadlier purpose. "We're adapting the asteroid mining charges into warheads. It's not sophisticated, but they should pack a punch that'll make the 4th of July look like a birthday candle." Elena nodded, but her attention was focused on the tactical display showing the Ravager fleet. They had passed Mars 30 minutes ago, and their intentions were becoming clear. They weren't heading for Earth. They were heading for the asteroid belt, where the majority of humanity's industrial capacity was located. Smart move. Take out the factory before attacking the customers. They're not just conquerors, she realized, aloud, her voice carrying a mix of admiration and terror. They're strategic. They want to eliminate our ability to resist before they claim the prize. Marcus Chen looked up from his workstation, his face pale with a combination of exhaustion and adrenaline. "Director, I'm getting reports from the outer system. The Ravagers aren't just advancing, they feeding their stripping resources from every asteroid they pass, somehow converting matter directly into energy. Their ships are actually growing larger." Elena felt a chill of understanding that went deeper than the cold of space. The Guardian's final message suddenly made sense. The Ravagers didn't just conquer civilizations, they consumed them entirely, using the raw materials to fuel their endless expansion. They were less an army than a cosmic plague, a cancer that grew stronger with every world it devoured. "Ma'am," called out a technician from the communications array, his voice shaking. "I'm picking up something strange. not from the Ravagers. From ... everywhere. Like an echo bouncing through space. Lena moved to the communication station and listened to the strange signal. It was faint, almost lost in the cosmic background radiation, but there was a pattern to it. A desperate, repeating message in dozens of different languages and frequencies. The universal language of the dying. It's from other civilizations, she breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The Ravagers have been doing this for millennia. This is the death cry of entire species. The weight of that realization settled over the command center like a shroud. They weren't just fighting for humanity's survival, they were fighting to prevent humanity from joining that cosmic chorus of the consumed. How many worlds had sent out similar signals? How many species had fought just as desperately? Only 2. Become part of the Ravagers' collective hunger? Director Rebecca Kim said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The first wave of Ravager scouts has entered the asteroid belt. They're heading straight for Ceres. Alina looked at the tactical display, watching the red dots of enemy ships approaching the blue indicators of human settlements. Each red dot represented a ship the size of a city block, moving with the inexorable certainty of death itself. In 4 hours, the main defenses would be ready. But the Ravagers would be here in 2. Time, the one resource that couldn't be manufactured, mined, or conjured out of thin air. They were about to learn if desperation could be a force multiplier. "All right," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never commanded a military operation but understood the stakes better than anyone. "We're going to have to make do with what we have. Activate all completed weapon systems. Deploy the mining ships as improvised fighters, and send a message to every human settlement in the solar system." "What message?" asked Marcus, his fingers poised over the communications console. Alina turned to face the assembled command staff. And for a moment, she saw not the scientists and engineers they had been yesterday, but the warriors they were becoming today. The transformation was written in their faces, the same expression that had carried humans through ice ages, across oceans, and into the void between stars. Tell them that 50 years ago we chose peace over war. Today, we choose survival over extinction. The Guardians tried to make us forget what we were, but they couldn't erase what we are. What? We are the species that conquered fire, that crossed oceans, that reached for the stars. And we will not go quietly into the void. As the first Ravager ships entered weapons range, Lena felt something she hadn't experienced in 50 years of peace, the electric anticipation of battle. It was like touching a live wire, terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Humanity was about to discover whether the warrior spirit could be awakened. After so long asleep, the first shots fired by human weapons in half a century lit up the asteroid, like a new constellation. Particle beams lanced through space, missile swarms bloomed like deadly flowers, and mining ships that had never been designed for combat threw themselves at alien destroyers with the fury of hornets defending their hive. The war for humanity's survival had begun. But as Alina watched the initial exchange of fire on the tactical display, she realized something that chilled her to the bone. The Ravagers weren't just fighting back, they were learning. Each human attack, their defensive patterns adapted, their counterattacks became more precise. She could see their formations shifting, their tactics evolving in real time. They weren't just a plague of conquest, they were a plague of evolution, becoming stronger with each civilization they consumed. And they had consumed so very many. The question that haunted Alina as explosions lit up the void was simple. Could humanity evolve faster than their destroyers? Or would they become just another voice in that cosmic chorus of the dead? Speaking of evolution and adaptation, there's another force that grows stronger over time through small, consistent changes. Just like humanity's desperate fight for survival, the power of compounding can transform the impossible into the inevitable. Don't miss our next video where we reveal how this hidden force can revolutionize your life one day at a time. The battle of Ceres lasted 18 hours and changed humanity forever. 18 hours less time than it takes to binge watch a TV series, but long enough to rewrite the DNA of an entire species. Dr. Alina Vasquez had been awake for 36 hours straight, living on coffee and pure adrenaline, watching humanity's peaceful civilization transform into something their Guardian protectors would never have recognized. Alina watched from the command center as the mining ship Prospector's Dream made its final run against a Ravager cruiser. The vessel, originally designed to extract rare minerals from asteroids, had been hastily fitted with explosive charges and turned into a makeshift kamikaze weapon. It was like watching someone turn a delivery truck into a missile desperate, improvised and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Its pilot, a woman named Rosa Martinez, who had spent 30 years peacefully mining the belt, transmitted her final words as she accelerated toward the alien ship. Her voice was calm, almost serene, like she was discussing the weather instead of her own death. "This is for my daughter and her daughter and all the daughters who will never be born if we fail today." The explosion, when the Prospector's Dream detonated against the Ravager hull, was visible from Earth, a new star blooming in the darkness, beautiful and terrible. It took the alien cruiser with it, both ships disappearing in a ball of nuclear fire that briefly outshone the sun. But Alina knew the victory was Pyrrhic. They had lost 12 ships to destroy one Ravager vessel, and the main fleet was still approaching like a tide of death. "Status report," she called out, her voice hoarse from hours of continuous command. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything. Around her, the command center looked like a disaster zone, sparking consoles, bloodied personnel, and the acrid smell of burned electronics filling the air. "We've managed to destroy 6 Ravager ships," reported Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Kim. Blood trickling from a head wound sustained when the command center had taken a direct hit. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes still burned with determination. "But we've lost 43 mining vessels to defense platforms, and ... She paused, consulting her tablet with shaking hands. "Approximately 800 personnel." Alina closed her eyes briefly. 800 people who had lived their entire lives in peace, who had never imagined they would die in battle. Teachers, engineers, miners, scientists, people who had chosen the stars because they believed in a future without war. But they had died fighting, and that made all the difference. Their sacrifice had meaning. "Ma'am," Marcus Chen called out urgently, his voice cutting through the chaos of the command center. "I'm picking up something from the Ravager fleet. It's not a communication, exactly. More like they're talking to each other." Alina moved to the communications station, stepping over fallen debris and trying to ignore the ringing in her ears from the last bombardment. She listened to the strange harmonics emanating from the alien ship sounds that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the brain. The translation systems were struggling with the alien language. Fragments were coming through like pieces of a nightmare puzzle. ... Unexpected resistance. Adaptation required. These creatures fight with strange purpose. ... Double. ... Not like the others. ... They choose death over submission. This is ... new. Alina felt a spark of hope pierce through the exhaustion and fear. The Ravagers were confused. After millennia of conquest, sweeping across the galaxy like a cosmic plague, they had encountered something unprecedented, a species that fought not just for survival, but for the right to choose their own fate. "Marcus, can you clean up that signal? I need to understand what they're saying." She gripped the console so hard her knuckles went white. Understanding your enemy, that was the first rule of warfare that even 50 years of peace couldn't erase. As Marcus worked to improve the translation, Alina turned back to the tactical display. The Ravager fleet had paused in their advance, holding position just outside the main asteroid belt. They were ... regrouping. Planning? Or had humanity actually given them something to think about? It was like watching a tsunami suddenly stop. Midwave and natural, and deeply unsettling. The answer came through the communications. A ray in a voice that was unmistakably different from the guttural tones of the previous Ravager communications. This voice was older, more measured, carrying the weight of eons and the weariness of countless conquered worlds. "Humans of Sol System, I am the hunger that remembers, eldest of the Ravagers. In 10,000 years of consumption, we have never encountered a species like yours. You fight when defeat is certain. You sacrifice when survival is offered. You choose pain over pleasure, death over submission. This is fascinating. Alina grabbed the communications console with both hands, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was at first contact with the enemy leadership. Everything humanity had learned about diplomacy, negotiation, and communication was about to be put to the ultimate test. This is Director Alina Vasquez of the Terran Defense Forces. If you find us fascinating, perhaps you'd like to discuss terms other than our complete annihilation. The response came after a long pause, long enough for Alina to wonder if she'd just signed humanity's death warrant. Director Alina Vasquez. We have consumed the knowledge of 17 civilizations. None spoke of terms. All begged for mercy, offered tribute, sought to bargain for their lives. You speak of war as if it were a choice rather than a necessity. Why? Alina looked around the command center at the faces of her people, bloodied but unbroken. These were humans who had lived 50 years of peace, who had never known the brutality of war. Yet when faced with extinction, they had chosen to fight, not because they had to, but because they decided to. Because, she said into the communication array, her voice carrying across space to an alien intelligence, older than human civilization. We learned something during our time of peace. We learned that survival isn't enough. We learned that some things are worth dying for. And one of those things is the right to choose our own destiny. Another pause. When the hunger that remembers spoke again, there was something different in its tone, something that might have been wonder, or confusion, or perhaps the first stirring of something long forgotten. You speak of choice as if it were sacred, as if the right to choose were more valuable than life itself. It is, Alina replied without hesitation, because without choice, life is just existence. An existence without purpose is no different from death. The silence that followed stretched for several minutes. Alina watched the tactical display, expecting the Ravager fleet to resume their advance at any moment. Instead, something unprecedented happened, something that would be studied by historians for millennia to come. The alien ships began to withdraw. Director Rebecca Kim said in amazement, "They're pulling back. The entire fleet is retreating to the outer system." Alina couldn't believe what she was seeing. The Ravagers, who had supposedly never retreated from any conquest, were withdrawing. But why? What had changed in the space of a single conversation? The answer came through the communications array, and it changed everything. Director Alina Vasquez. The Ravagers have decided. We will not consume your species. Not because we cannot, but because you have shown us something we had forgotten. You have reminded us that we too once had a choice. Long ago, before the hunger consumed us, we chose to become what we are. We chose to devour rather than create, to take rather than give, to consume rather than preserve. Alina felt her heart racing. And now we choose differently. We will leave your system, and we will carry the memory of your choice with us. Perhaps, Perhaps it is time for the Ravagers to remember what we were before we became what we are. As the alien fleet began to disappear into hyperspace, Alina sank into her command chair. Around her, the control room erupted in celebration, but she felt only exhaustion and a deep, profound sadness. They had won. Humanity had survived, but at what cost? What would they become now that they had remembered how to fight? The answer to that question would define the next chapter of human history. But that's a story that unfolds slowly, over time, through countless small decisions and actions. Speaking of powerful transformations that happen gradually, discover how the force of compounding can create extraordinary changes in your own life, one day at a time, in our next video. 6 months later, Commander Oliver Reed stood in the rebuilt command center of Luna Base, watching the latest intelligence reports. With grim satisfaction, the lunar facility had been transformed from a peaceful research station into humanity's primary military command center, a change that would have horrified the Guardians, but perfectly reflected humanity's evolution. The Ravager fleet had withdrawn to the outer system, but they hadn't left. They were waiting, like predators studying their prey, learning patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "They're studying us," reported Dr. Emma Carter, now serving as Earth's chief xenobiologist. Her peaceful career, studying alien artifacts, had taken a dramatic turn toward understanding alien psychology and warfare tactics. Every engagement, every battle, they're learning from our tactics. But here's the thing, we're learning from theirs too. Oliver nodded, his weathered face showing the strain of 6 months of constant vigilance. The war had changed humanity in ways they were still discovering. The forced pacifism of the Guardian era had ended, but what had emerged wasn't the brutal militarism of the past. It was something new, a warrior spirit tempered by wisdom, strength guided by compassion. They'd learned to fight without losing their humanity. "The colony ships are ready," announced Captain James Mitchell, now serving as director of the evacuation program. His voice carried the weight of impossible decisions: who goes, who stays, who lives, who might die. "We can move 100 million people to the Alpha Centauri system within the next year. Get them far enough away that even if Earth falls, and leave Earth defenseless." Oliver's voice cut through the proposal like a blade. "No, we don't abandon our home, we defend it." The statement hung in the air with the finality of a judge's gavel. Some lines once drawn couldn't be uncrossed. The debate that followed was one that would define humanity's future. Some argued for evacuation, for spreading humanity across the galaxy to ensure the species' survival, the classic insurance policy approach. Others demanded they stand and fight, making the Ravagers pay. For every inch of human space, it was the eternal human dilemma: flight or fight, safety or honor, survival or principle. But you know what they say about the best-laid plans? They usually get interrupted by something completely unexpected. Commander Reed called out Lieutenant Lucas Thompson from the communications station. His voice tight with excitement and confusion. "We're receiving a transmission. Not from the Ravagers, from somewhere else. Multiple sources, actually. And sir, you're going to want to see this." The holographic display filled with images of alien species beings of every conceivable shape and form. Some were humanoid, with features that suggested ancient wisdom, others completely alien with geometries that hurt to look at directly. But all carried the same message, and that message was about to change everything. People of Earth spoke a crystalline being that looked remarkably like the vanished Guardians. Its voice resonating with harmonics that seemed to speak directly to the soul. "We are the survivors, the species that have faced the Ravagers and lived. We have been watching your resistance with great interest." Oliver felt his pulse quicken. Other survivors? In 6 months of fighting, they'd intercepted countless death cries from consumed civilizations. But this was the first sign that some species had actually survived Ravager attacks. Another alien, one resembling a massive insect with compound eyes that reflected starlight, continued the message. "Your species has done something remarkable. You have fought the Ravagers to a standstill. In 5,000 years of conquest, no species has ever forced them to retreat. 5,000 years?" Oliver let that number sink in. The Ravagers had been devouring civilizations since before humans had invented writing. And in all that time, no one had ever made them back down. Until now. "We offer you an alliance," added a third being, whose form seemed to shift like liquid mercury, beautiful and unsettling in equal measure. Not as protectors, but as equals. "Together, we can end the Ravager threat forever." Oliver felt his heart racing. Humanity was not alone. They were not the first to face this enemy, and they would not be the last. But they were the first to prove that the Ravagers could be stopped. It's the first to show that the cosmic plague could be fought, could be beaten. "What do you propose?" he asked, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. The answer came from all the alien voices at once, creating a harmony that seemed to resonate through the command center itself. "War. Total war. Not for conquest, but for survival. The Ravagers must be stopped before they consume everything in their path." Oliver looked around the command center at the faces of his people. They were scarred, tired, running on coffee and determination, but unbroken. They had discovered something about themselves in the crucible of battle. They were not just survivors, they were warriors. But more than that, they were protectors. They'd learned to fight not for the joy of violence, but for the preservation of everything they held dear. Send a message to the Ravager fleet, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak for his species. Tell them we have an answer to their ultimatum. The transmission that went out to the Ravager leadership was simple and direct. But it carried the weight of human history. This is Commander Oliver Reed of the Terran Defense Forces. You offered us a choice: surrender or death. Choose neither. We choose war. We choose to fight not just for our own survival, but for the survival of every species you have threatened. Come if you dare, but know this: humanity stands with the galaxy now, and we will not yield. The response came within hours, and it was everything they'd expected and feared. The Ravager fleet, reinforced by ships from across their empire, began its final approach to Earth. But this time, they were not facing a defenseless world. They were facing humanity united with a dozen other species. All determined to end the Ravager threat forever, ships began emerging from hyperspace. Around Earth, not the predatory black vessels of the Ravagers, but gleaming ships of a dozen different designs representing civilizations that had survived by hiding, by running, by enduring. Now they were ready to stand and fight. The final battle for Earth and the galaxy was about to begin. As the alien fleets converged on the solar system, Oliver felt something he hadn't experienced since the crisis began. Hope. Not the hope of survival, but the hope of victory. Humanity had been forbidden from war for 50 years, but they had never forgotten how to fight. And now, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, they would show the universe what humans were truly capable of when they fought not for conquest, but for the right to exist. The war to end all wars was about to begin, and humanity would not be fighting alone, but that final battle, and it's incredible outcome is a story that builds on everything we've discovered about the power of unity, determination, and small actions creating massive change. Just like how humanity's survival sparked a galactic alliance, there's another force that can transform your world through steady compound growth. Discover how the principle of compounding can create extraordinary results in your own life in our next video.